Welcome back to the Humple Hut. My name is Five Potatoes, and last month I had a very long plane flight. Most people on that plane were passing the time by watching movies, but I did something a little different. I decided to rewrite the entire MetaZoo rules from scratch. Yep, it took me a while, but I rewrote the full rulebook, and then once I landed, I compared the rules to the official rules, my rules to the official rules, and corrected any major errors that I made. So, why did I do this? Well, I personally found the official rules to be a little bit confusing and wanted to write it in a way that made more sense to me. I played a ton of games. I asked a lot of questions within the MetaZoo Discord gameplay channel, and it took me a long time to get a full understanding, in my opinion, of the MetaZoo game. So by rewriting them, I hope that it can help others pick up the game faster and jump in and have fun playing. So I'll cover all the rules in this video, but we're also going to post the videos on a website. So that website is the MetaZooArchives.org website. So this was created, or it currently is run by Cutthroat Zoo. That's his Discord name. I've been working with him. We're going to post the full written version that I did on the plane on this website. If you haven't checked it out, I've been loving this website. He's got a ton of good information on here. Uh, I really liked the MZ Classic section. There's a lore section, and I read the original lore, which I thought was a lot of fun. But we are going to create a new tab, and it is going to be called the Community Gameplay Brews. I'll put a link in the description of this video to make it easier for everyone to find. As of recording, the rules aren't on there, but by the time this video is published, they should be up there, and you should be able to find and pull them along. So if you don't want to hear me ramble, go read them yourselves. Let me know if you found that the rules to be helpful. But otherwise, if you prefer a verbal version, stick around. So let's jump right into it. So I want to cover, switch it real quick. So I want to caveat a couple of things. These rules I've been calling the Humple Hut variation. They do differ slightly from the official rules. I tried to stick as close to the original game as possible, but did make a couple of changes. The main times I made changes were to incorporate generally agreed upon rules that were discussed within the MetaZoo Discord when they differ from the original rulebook. I tried to add additional context and details that I thought were left out, but helped me better fully understand the game. And I simplified a couple of different areas to try to make it easier and more fun to play. So if you are playing in an official MetaZoo tournament, please reference the official rules and not the Humple Hut variation. Let me start with basics. So MetaZoo is a trading card game based around cryptids. So think of Mothman, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster. Those are some of the main ones, but like any type of cryptid, pretty much, it's in the game. And it's been a lot of fun learning about the different varieties of cryptids. So the objective of the game is to earn 30 mission points or achieve one of multiple alternative win conditions, or uh, if your opponent is unable to draw a card from their main deck, so if they have no more cards. If at any point any of those are met, the game immediately ends, and then you win the game. The games are played with two players, and it's important to note that all of these rules that I'm covering, the card text will supersede any of these rules. So if card text contradicts anything I'm talking about, use and follow the card text. So I think one way I try to teach is to distill the game down to like its full essence. So if I had to describe MetaZoo game and how it's played in a couple of sentences, this is the best I could come up with. It Players take turns tapping aura to pay for creatures and equipment. They play these creatures and equipment in one of four lanes, and each player is competing to win missions in these lanes by having the greatest total of influence in that lane. So that's the core method of winning the game and how it's played. So the first step we'll need, I'll cover multiple different aspects of the game, but the first thing you'll need to play is building a deck. I'm not going to go through all of the nuances of building a deck. I made a video, uh, what actually now at this point it's last year. Yeah, it's been a long time now on how to make a deck. I talked about different math, what value cost cards you should have, what ratios you should have to make the deck run smoothly. So check that out if you want to dive more into details, but this is going to just cover the basics of what you need for a deck. I'll try to put that, hopefully I remember, I'll put that link in the description or attach it to the video somehow. So the first thing for building a deck, select a caster. The caster, all of the cards have a card type listed, and the cards you're trying to look for are the ones that are listed and labeled caster. So these are like your main character or like who you are and kind of how the deck and the playstyle revolves around your caster. So pick one that's kind of fun, and then you'll need to decide if you want to play with if you want to play with just your caster's primary aura type. That is the main color of that card. It's also shown by that big symbol at the top. In this case, it is for Skylar Brand, it is a red or the fire aura type, shown by that fire symbol in the upper left, just below the cost number. Um, you'll have to decide if you want to play with just the primary aura or if you want to play with the primary and the secondary aura. The secondary aura, if the caster is aligned with that type of aura, is located in the bottom right. In this case, it's that moon and that cloud. This is the dark aura. So it is an option. You don't have to play with it, but if you want, you can play with your primary and one of the secondary aura if it has more than one or any at all. I recommend if you're first starting to just play with the primary aura type. It's a little bit easier, a little less complicated. But if you played trading card games before, go ahead, choose the secondary aura type. I think it adds a lot of elements to the game. So if you're just playing with your caster's primary aura type, you'll need a couple of things. You'll need to pick starting Terra. You have to select two different starting Terra cards, and these starting Terra must match your primary aura type of your caster. Next, you'll need to have a main deck. This deck is constructed of a minimum of 50 cards. You can have more than that. There's no maximum. Minimum of 50 cards matching the primary aura type of your caster. It cannot contain any aura type, other aura types that don't match your caster. Also, all the cards in the deck, these cards cannot contain the following. They can't contain more than 3 copies of any identically named card, any copies of the starter Terras that you selected earlier. It can contain other starting Terras, just not the 2 that you selected to start the game with. It also cannot contain any casters and any aura within that main deck. After you complete your main deck, you'll need to create an aura deck. This aura deck it comprises of 10 of your primary aura cards. And so that's all you need um, uh, for your deck and all the components if you're just playing with your caster's primary aura type. Now, if you're playing with the primary and one of the secondary aura types, there's a couple of differences. The first one is for your starting Terra. You'll have to select one starting Terra that matches the primary aura type of your caster and one that matches the selected secondary aura type of your caster. You must have one of both. And again, both of these have to have that keyword starter for that Terra. The main deck construction is more or less the same, except this time it can comprise of any cards matching your primary and or your secondary aura types of your caster. Your aura deck is identical. it has to comprise of just 10 of your primary aura type. And this last part is where it mainly differs. Uh, if you're playing with a secondary aura type, you will set aside some. I typically recommend 2 to 5 uh, aura matching your selected secondary aura type of your caster. These cards are not part of your aura deck. Um, I typically set them outside of the game. They are used and introduced later. I'll describe that later in the video of how they are introduced. So now let's move into the setup of the game. So each player will perform these steps in the following order. So they must be done in this order. The first thing is each player will shuffle their main deck and their aura deck, and then allow their opponent to touch each of those decks if they choose. Next, randomly select a player. Typically, I randomly select a player by having each player roll a die, and then the high die is that randomly selected player. That randomly selected player decides if they want to start the game as the priority or the secondary player. I'll describe what the priority and secondary player mean later in the game. Most people will just select the priority player. Only some decks I would recommend selecting the secondary player, but for the most part, it is advantageous to select the priority player to start the game. Then each player will place each component of their deck and everything they brought to play in the designated locations. Yeah, let's run through it. I'll try to throw up show quickly a visual of each of those locations. This graphic is located within that document. So if you want to reference it later, it's in that document on the MetaZoo Archives website. But you will place your caster in the caster zone, the aura deck in this location. Place your main deck in the upper right location, and then your discard pile would be down below. And then these spots up top are the Terra locations. And then right below it is all of each of the lanes. The lanes are in, I like to call them from left to right, lane 1, lane 2, lane 3, and lane 4. The sections down below are the friendly zones. The sections up above are the your opponent's zones where they would be playing their cards, and then you would play them in your friendly zones for each of the lanes. So each player will place their starting Terra in the following order. So the priority player would start first. They would place one of their two, they get to choose, Terra cards in the lane 1 Terra spot. Next, the secondary player would place one of their two, again of their choice, in the second lane Terra spot. And then I think you see where this is going. Then the priority player would place their last Terra in the lane 3 Terra spot. And finally, the secondary player would place their last Terra in the lane 4 spot. Players do get to choose which of their starter Terras will go in their designated locations, but they're placed in order from lane 1 to lane 4, as I described. Next, each player will draw the top card of their aura deck and place it in their aura zone. And then each player will draw the top 5 cards of their main deck and put it in their hand. I like to play with no mulligan. For competitive games, the game is really well designed, and I think playing with no mulligan really emphasizes good deck design and build. But for casual games, a lot of people like to play with mulligans. So if you are playing with a mulligan, then each player may take one mulligan by typically people will reshuffle their entire hand into their main deck, allow their reshuffle that deck, allow their opponent to cut that deck again if they choose, and then draw 5 brand new cards from the top of their main deck. Most people only play with one free mulligan, but again, if for casual play, choose what you want, do different variations of mulligan. It's just a fun variant. But for competitive, I prefer to play with no mulligans. So now let's play. Let's run through the gameplay. So games are played in the following order. The first phase is the draw phase. The second phase is the action phase. And then the third phase is the reset phase. And each of those, that comprises of one round. Um, this these rounds repeat until someone wins the game. So let's describe each of those phases. The first one, the draw phase. Every round, each player will draw the top card of their aura deck and their main deck. This includes the very first round. So you start the game at the beginning of the first round. For the draw phase, you will have 2 aura in your aura zone and 6 cards in your hand. There's no maximum hand size, and each player can only have a maximum of 10 aura in their aura zone and in any of the lanes. So it's restricted to the number of aura cards within your aura deck. The next phase is the action phase. This is where the bulk of the game takes place. In the action phase, players take turns taking one action at a time. So one action, one action. Uh, this begins with the priority player and then goes to the secondary player and then so on. Players must take an action and they cannot skip their turn. The action phase will end when all missions have been resolved. So all 4 lanes when those missions are resolved. I will describe later on what actions you can take during the action phase. Um, but I'll just finish with the rest of the phases. So the last phase is what I like to call the reset phase. In this one, you will untap all cards that have been tapped. You will remove all temporary effects. These are typically like give or dealt effects from all cards. So if a card has damage, you would remove it, and so on. You will return all aura that have been played in lanes back to the aura zone, and players then they would switch being the priority and the secondary player. So um, every round you will trade off on who gets to go first for the next round. And again, this repeats until someone wins. So let's cover the actions that you can take within the action phase. So it's important to note that some actions will trigger multiple different effects simultaneously. If this happens, the active player gets to choose the order of these simultaneous effects. What that means is the active player is the player that did that action that's currently happening. So if you're ever confused on like what's the order, the person that did the action to cause those simultaneous effects gets to select the order to their advantage if they would like. So the first action I wanted to cover is playing a card. So to play a card from your hand or from your caster zone, you can play your caster from your caster zone. You play this by tapping the aura in your aura zone equal to the cost of that card. The cost is shown in the upper leftmost number. At least one aura matching that card's aura type must be tapped to play it. If the card costs 0 aura, then at least one of that aura type must be in your aura zone, tapped or untapped, it doesn't matter because it costs 0, to play it. But you must have at least one aura matching that card to play it. You can tap as many of your secondary aura as you want to fill up that full number, but a minimum of one to play that card. So for casters, creatures, and equipment, they are played into the friendly side of a lane as long as the lane limit has not been met. So as long as there's space for them, they can be played within that lane. Um, there's a couple other restrictions. You also can't play it in a lane that already has a card with the exact same name in it. So if your friendly lane already has a card with the exact same card in that lane, it can't go in that same lane. It can go in other lanes as long as it doesn't have the unique trait. So some cards will have the unique characterizer or trait on it. If it has this unique trait, then um, it can only be there can only be one of these cards in all friendly lanes, period. Unique is usually added on to more powerful cards, and so you can only have one on your side. Your opponent can have that same one on their side, but you can only have one of that unique card. Lanes typically have a 5 card limit for each side of the lane. So your opponent and you both can put 5 cards, unless it's modified, um, in your lane. This does not include the Terra card. The Terra is kind of a neutral one, and it doesn't count to either player's lane limit. The next card I want to talk about are strategy cards. Strategy cards are played into the discard pile. These are more like instant types of cards. Terra cards are played in the Terra slot of a lane. So this replaces existing Terra cards in that lane with the new card. You would place that old Terra card into the owner's discard pile, and there can be multiple Terras of the same name in different lanes. However, just like the caster's creatures and equipment, if the Terra has that unique trait, there can only be one copy of that card in any lane. The next action I want to cover is activating a card ability. So a number of cards have different abilities, and these are like super fun to play with. So if your card has an activated ability, this is designated by that ability name being colored in light green. So this is to try to help for ease of identification. So all other abilities are not considered active abilities and they have different effects. But for activated abilities, these are triggered by paying any additional costs associated with it. Activated abilities can be used from your cards in your caster zone and the friendly side of all of your lanes. You cannot activate or use your opponent's um, activated abilities on their cards and their caster. Activated abilities can also only be used once per round unless it has the unlimited modifier. So some of them will say unlimited. You can use it as many times as you would like. Again, you can only do one action at a time before your opponent has a time to react. A couple other ways you can use activated abilities multiple times around is if the card can be played again, so returns your hand and replayed, then that activated ability can be used multiple times within the round because it's sort of like refreshed within your hand. There's another one, well, within the main rules. I know this one's a little bit confusing, but um, it states that activated abilities that have a cost of tapping the card, so either partial or total, those activated abilities with a tapping ability can be used multiple times around as long as that card can be tapped and retapped and the full cost can be repaid again. So next action I want to cover is declaring a mission. So declaring a mission in a lane is typically marked by tapping the Terra. Like, you can mark it in other ways. I know some people use coins or other things, but the traditional way is to take that Terra and to turn it 90 degrees. Each mission can only be declared once per round. Missions can be declared even if the Terra is raised. What raised means is if that Terra is destroyed or missing, lane has been raised. Declared. So even if there's no Terra, the lane can still be declared. You can still put units in that lane. It just doesn't have that Terra effect. Declaring a mission has 3 different phases. I like to break it down into 3 main phases, and they follow in this order. The first one is the mission declaration, then the during mission phase, and finally the mission resolution phase. So the mission declaration phase, this one triggers all effects that say mission declaration. So all of those will work first within that lane that's being declared. Next, you have the during mission. You will resolve any during mission and during mission resolution effects. So some cards have the words during mission or during mission resolution. Both of these things will happen during the mission phase. After those effects have been resolved, Then you will reward the winner of the mission by adding up the total influence in each player's side of that lane. So in that upper right number, that is the influence of the creatures and equipment. You'll you'll add up yours in your side and compare it to your opponent's. If you have more, you win that lane. If your opponent has more, they win that lane. If it's tied, no one gets any mission points. So how the mission points, or MP, a lot of people call them MP, it's the same thing. How mission points are rewarded: if the um, if it's a tie, it's 0. That's the easiest one. If it's a contested lane, you will win 1 mission point. If it's uncontested lane, you will win 2 mission points. So what does a contested lane and an uncontested lane means? So it's all based off of the losing side. So if once you add up the mission points and determine who has more, if the losing side has a creature, that's considered a contested lane. So that player won it, but their opponent had a creature in the lane, so it's contested, and they only get 1 mission point. So an uncontested lane is the losing side doesn't have a creature at all. So if the person that won, um, if you look at the losing side and they have no creature, it's sort of like you won by quite a lot in that instance, and you get 2 mission points. So winning an uncontested lane can be very beneficial. And then the final is the mission resolution. So multiple cards will have the keyword on mission resolution. So at this phase, you will resolve all of those types of effects, and that completes the declaration action. Another action is the enhance lane. So you can use an action to enhance a lane. What this means is if you have a friendly unit, and a unit means a caster, creature, equipment, or a token. So if you have a friendly unit in a lane with the aura enhancement symbol, then you can use an action to place an untapped friendly aura in the friendly aura enhanceable unit's lane. You still have to follow lane size restrictions when you enhance a lane, and a lane can be enhanced multiple times in a row. So you can use multiple actions during that round to put as many aura as that lane size allows. The final action I want to cover is trade aura. So you can tap an aura to replace one of your aura in your aura zone with a secondary aura that you set outside of the game in the beginning of the game. This secondary aura is then placed into the aura zone in the state that you replace the aura with. So if you take that after tapping an aura, you'll take that secondary aura and replace one of any of your aura in your aura zone. If that replaced aura was tapped, that secondary aura comes in tapped. If that aura was untapped, that secondary aura would come in untapped. It's important to note that trading aura only costs an aura to tap if it's being used as an action. There are some cards that have the keywords you may trade an aura. Like, so there's a strategy card that says you may trade an aura. If you play that card, it doesn't cost a aura to be tapped to use that ability. So those are all the actions. I want to cover the card types in a little bit more detail so people kind of know some of the limitations of each of the cards. So there are 7 different card types. I think I've talked about each one of them, but not into a ton of depth. So there's a caster, aura, terra, creature, equipment, strategy, and tokens. So those are the 7 card types currently in the MetaZoo game. So the first one, the caster. The caster starts the game in the caster zone and can be played to a lane by paying its cost. Casters count only as a caster when they're in the caster zone. However, they count as both a caster and a creature when they are played in a lane. Cards cannot affect a caster in the caster zone unless it explicitly is stated. But when it's in a lane, because it's treated as a creature, there are multiple cards that can affect creatures and hence your caster. And if an effect would result in your caster going to a player's hand, discard pile, or any other location, instead place it face down in your caster zone. A face down caster prevents a player from using that caster's abilities and prevents that player from replaying it to a lane. Um, so yeah, it's the caster can only be really in two places: the caster zone or in a lane. The casters have a couple of different powers or abilities. The caster power, this is listed at the bottom portion of that card. The caster power can be used while the caster is in the caster zone or in a lane. The upper portion is the normal ability text. The caster's normal ability can only be used when the caster is in a lane. So the caster power is super special. It can be used whenever, and since the caster can't really be affected in the caster zone, it can be a great ability to rely on throughout the whole duration of the game as long as you don't play it into a lane and then your opponent kind of destroy and return it face down into the caster zone. So let's cover Aura. Aura, they're used to pay for cards, pay for abilities, and to enhance lanes. Aura can contribute influence and use abilities. You can use the aura abilities as well if it is in a lane with a friendly creature. If there's no friendly creature, then um, it does not contribute influence. Aura are not considered units, so they can't really be affected by destruction and shattering. If any effect would result in the aura going to a player's hand, discard pile, or main deck, instead you would place it in the owner's aura zone in its current tapped or untapped state. So for Terra card abilities affect both players regardless of who played the card or who owns the card. So it affects both players equally. Terras are not considered a unit as well. Creatures, they're played in a friendly lane to help a player win missions, and so a player can use their abilities. For equipment only contribute influence and can use their abilities if if they are in a lane with a friendly creature. Otherwise, they have no effect at all. This the way I like to describe it is if there is a knife in a room and no one's in the room, the knife does nothing, right? You have to have a person or a creature, right, in the room to be able to use that equipment. Equipment also are not attached to any units. They are just played within the lane. So if a creature in that lane is destroyed, that equipment can still be there. Strategy cards. These are played to the discard pile and they have effects that are used immediately when played. And tokens. Tokens are created by card effects. So they are never within your main deck. When tokens are created, you will add a token from outside of the game to the designated lane where it was created. Tokens can only be outside of the game or in a lane. If an effect would move it to a different zone, then it would be placed outside of the game instead. Tokens are never dispelled. Um, Dispelled is when a unit is in play is placed in the discard pile. Since a token cannot be placed in the discard pile, it can never be dispelled. Nor can they ever really be played since they don't come from a player's hand. They are created. So finally, I'm going to cover some of the card effects. So I recommend referencing the document on MetaZoo Archives website for a bunch of the card effects. It's usually easier to reference all of these as you play a card. That section covers a bunch of keywords commonly used in different abilities and strategy cards to help people learn the game. So the first one is the action icon. So this icon just means that ability only requires an action to be able to use it. On play, this ability triggers when it is played from a player's hand or the caster zone to a lane. These abilities are in reference to the active player and not the card's owner. So that's pretty important because there are some cards that allow for players to use their opponent's abilities. And so if you use your opponent's on play ability, it would count as affecting the active player and not the owner. So you could actually use your opponent's on play ability to help yourself. So it's a kind of a cool cool rule in my opinion. It makes for some fun gameplay. Let's go to discover. So discover X number. Um, what this means is it'll have the keyword discover and then a number. When you play that card or when that ability takes place, you will draw the top X number of cards from the top of your main deck. You will select a card that meets the described requirements if there are any listed. Oftentimes it will say discover 5 a creature card, right? And so you can select, once you draw the 5 cards, you can select a creature card or whatever card meets your restrictions if there are any. Once that card is selected, you will show it to your opponent, and then you will place that selected card in your hand. Finally, the remaining cards you will place at the bottom of your deck in the order that you desire. A player does not need to select a card when they discover. So if they pull it all up and you can select a card, you don't have to select a card. Dispelled, this just means the card is put into the discard pile from play. Duel, this is a fun one. Duel, you will select 2 creatures, typically your friendly creature and your opponent's creature, and they deal damage to each other simultaneously. Damage is equivalent to the unit's influence. So that upper right number, that number counts as everything. I really like this. It really simplifies the game. That number means the influence contributed to the missions. When it deals damage, that's that same value. It's also its health. It's all of it all wrapped up. So for damage, when a creature is dealt the damage, if it is lower than the amount of influence or the health of that unit, you place a counter. Usually, I put dice to mark the amount of damage on that unit. If the damage would ever be equal to or greater than that unit's influence, then that unit would be destroyed and put into that owner's discard pile. The damage is removed at the end of every round during that reset phase. For destruction, destruction is very fun. This ability only triggers if the owner won the lane. So if the owner of that card won the lane, then the losing player shatters a unit of their choice in the losing lane. Gigantic. Some cards have gigantic one. Gigantic, what that means is it reduces the friendly lane size by whatever number that is. So it's just to try to help designate like that creature or that unit is very large. Hex counters. So hex counters, these are placed on different units. For every hex counter on a unit, that unit will contribute -1 influence, 1 less influence during mission. This does not affect the unit's total like influence when determining health and damage. It only matters when you're adding up the values of who's going to win that actual mission. Hex counters are only removed from a unit if it goes to a player's hand, deck, discard pile, or the caster zone. Otherwise, the hex counters will persist on that unit from round to round. Units can contribute negative influence, which makes it a lot of fun. So sometimes it's cool just to load one creature with a ton of influence, and it's got like -5 contribution when when a mission is declared. Lane size reductions. So some abilities will reduce the lane size. If a player has more cards in a lane than the maximum size when the lane size is reduced, then they must remove a card of their choice to meet the new lane size requirement. So remove is not the same as sacrifice, dispelled, or shattered. So some cards have different effects that matter if a unit is sacrifice, dispelled, or shattered, but removal is just different. Um, this removal would place casters face down in the caster zone. It would place creatures and equipment in the discard pile. And it would place tokens outside of the game. Oh, and finally, it also places aura back in the aura zone. Move would relocate a unit to a lane. Um, you can only move it to a lane if there is if it's not at its maximum lane size limit. Overwhelm. Overwhelm usually has a number with it, 2, 3, whatever. This overwhelm ability only triggers if the owner won the lane by that number or more influence. Sacrifice. Sacrifice means you will place a friendly unit um, in the owner's discard pile. So you cannot sacrifice an opponent's unit. Sacrifice only means one of your own units. Soar. So this one has been a lot of people ask about Soar. So the way I look at it again is Soar. This ability only triggers if the owner won the lane. So um, if unit has Soar, if your unit has Soar and you won the lane, then it would trigger. If you lost a lane, Soar does nothing. Um, so if the owner of that card with Soar won the lane, then you would score that mission as uncontested. Unless the opponent, the losing side, has a unit with Soar. So if the losing side has a unit with Soar, the Soar and Soar would cancel out each other, and you would just score it as normal. So Soar will allow you, if you win, to score it as uncontested, potentially, and get to 2 mission points. Um, Even if otherwise it would be treated as contested. So it can be very powerful. So steel can be a little bit confusing. So there is steel, the ability, and then some card abilities have steel listed within it, and there's a slight difference. So steel, the ability, this is designated because it's typically within the light blue text coloration. So this only triggers if the owner won the lane. So if the owner won the lane for the steal ability, then um, you would take one of your opponent's mission points. They would and you would get it. So if your opponent has more than 0 total mission points, then you would reduce your opponent's total mission points by 1 and increase your total mission points by 1. This does not work if your opponent has 0 mission points because there's nothing to steal. For steal as the descriptor, this does not require you to have won that lane. So if an ability has steal within its description, it just means you can take one of your opponent's mission points. They go down 1, you go up 1, as long as they have more than 0 mission points. And then finally, I'll cover units again because a lot of cards mention units. Units include creatures, equipment, casters, or tokens. So that covers a vast majority of the rules. Yeah, I would highly recommend referencing the written rules within the MetaZoo Archives website. Let me know if you found this helpful, if you learned a couple of things. Again, these slightly differ from the official rules. I kept it as close to the gameplay as possible, but just try to make some changes and add some clarification where I thought would be beneficial and made it easier for me to learn. So hopefully this helps you learn a game and have more fun playing MetaZoo. Again, let me know in the comments if you found this helpful, and I'll see you next video. I hope you have a good day.